This little area right here was part of an addition that was made sometime way back in the past. We're not really sure when. But when they did this, they put the floor joists in and they bridged them, which was nice. None of the rest of the house has bridging. But the subfloor right here is actually up so high it actually serves as the finished floor up above. Today we're in our dining room, and as you can see it's completely empty, and we don't use this space at all right now, and we just eat in the kitchen, but eventually we'd like to turn this into a really beautiful space. Now the bay window behind me was added as an add-on sometime in the past. It wasn't part of the original house, and it was poorly done, and one of the reasons it is poorly done is you can see how this floor is right near here. You've got strip oak here, and you have really cheap low-grade lumber here on the floor. I don't know, maybe they expected just to carpet the whole thing, but that's not good. So what we're going to do is take these out. We're going to rebuild the floor structure underneath and lower it down, and that'll give us room to put new strip oak down here. And part of this project, which I think is going to be a whole lot of fun for you guys, is to see how we're going to take boards, big fat slabs, and turn them into oak flooring. So that'll come later, but right now I just want to point this out. So we've got oak boards here that are busted, cracked, and we'll pull those out, and we're going to try to figure out how many boards we need, and that'll help us to determine what kind of lumber we need to buy. Now, if I was to go down to one of the big box home center stores and buy oak, I would just say, all right, X times Y, and then figure out how many square feet I need, and then go buy that. The problem is with these old houses, their oak floors were really narrow. There were strips of oak that were 1.5 inches wide. And you can't buy that at Home Depot. You can't buy that at Lowe's. The best way to do that is you either have to go to a specialty place and pay a premium, or what we're going to do is we're going to go to a lumber yard that specializes in hardwoods. We're going to buy planks. We're going to run through saws and routers, and we're going to cut them down to the correct size, and we're going to replicate what's already here. So the first thing we need to know is how many linear feet of board do we need? In other words, to cover this entire area, how many feet of oak is it going to take to get that done? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark 1.5 inch increments along this board all the way to the wall. I'll do that on both sides, and that will replicate the size of the oak that will lay on there. And because we have an angle here, we have to be really careful, and that's why we have to have a lot of measurements. Once we get those, then we can just follow those lines and go across and measure precisely how much we need. And then once we have that, we'll add a little bit for waste and breakage. We are way overdue for an update. Since the last video was produced, the channel has literally exploded in viewership, and we've had a lot of subscribers, so thank you for all of those who joined us. And I apologize for the long delay between the videos, but we've been so busy trying to get things done, and we didn't capture a lot of it on video. So what I'm going to do is give you a quick walkthrough with some still photos, and normally I don't like to do that, but in this case it's all we have. So in the first photo, it basically mimics what you saw just a moment ago. That's the floor there with the junk lumber, which is how we bought the house. If you look in the background, you can see that we took off the radiator that was against the window, and we also pulled down the baseboards, and we got rid of them. Now, before you panic, those baseboards and that radiator were not original to the house, especially the baseboards themselves, because they were just kind of thrown together, poorly fabricated. So we'll be reproducing those at some point later on. In this next picture here, you'll see we took a delivery of some heavy equipment. We bought a jointer, a planer, and a dust collector. Now, with all this equipment, we'll be able to manufacture some more floorboards. Because you can't buy those strip oak boards anymore, we're going to go and reproduce those ourselves. Here's another shot of the machinery still in the crates. What we did was took this room, which was our office, and we vacated that, and we're turning that into a wood shop. Unfortunately, we didn't capture any of the footage of making the floorboards, but here you can see a stack of boards that's being processed. So what we did is we went to a sawmill and we bought rough cut stock, and we ran it through the jointer and the planer, and then we cut it down with a table saw, and here they are stacked up. And in this next photo here, you can see the machine work has been completed to a greater degree, and the last thing we have to do there, of course, is put the tongues and grooves in them. This picture here shows the pine subfloor that we're going to be building, and it was the same deal. We went to a sawmill and we picked this up from the sawmill and brought it back and then ran it through the machinery to get it down to the right size. In this photo here, you can see where we've torn open the floor, and right away you can see that there's floor joists, and there's a concrete strip right there which is causing us a lot of trouble at this point in time because it basically angles uphill. It's not flat. So we'll have to deal with that. In this photo here, you can see we've completely removed the subfloor and the bridging that was there. Over here, we took a rented jackhammer and busted all of this up. We got all the concrete out, and that was a big job. It took several days and maybe a couple weeks maybe to get all of that out of there. The next thing you see here is where we started cutting the floor joists down. We took about 2 inches off the top and reduced them down to a lower level. You can see that more clearly here. We had to do that in order to make room for the subfloor that we're going to put back in there. Here it is from another angle. You can see here we added bridging between the joists, and that was necessary to have a nailing surface for the subfloor that comes on next. Here you have the subfloor, which is partially installed, and by now the room is a complete disaster. And then over here is the subfloor completely installed. And here's another view of that as well. One thing that we didn't get a picture of was the area where the concrete was. We ended up having to pour new concrete in there once we got everything leveled up and flat. We filled that back in. That's basically the area where the brick wall transitions through there, where they cut that open. Now, here you can see me putting down strips of lath, and you may wonder why I'm doing that, but as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. The entire oak floor that these guys put in years and years ago has lath underneath it, so it is actually elevated up off the subfloor. So I followed suit, did exactly the same thing, and it turned out just fine. Here's another view of the lath complete. Here is a view of me inserting some lath into places where it had to go into the old floor. And you can start to see where I've woven in a couple of floorboards there, the new ones, into the old ones. In this view, you can see the new oak is being woven into the old oak. And it's probably about 2/3 of the way across the floor at this point. And here is a view of it after we've completed laying down the subfloor. I'm sorry, not the subfloor, the finished floor. And in this next view, this is after we sanded the floor, and unfortunately we didn't catch any video or images of that. But we took a drum sander and went over the entire floor and flattened it up to make sure that the old floor and the new floor were level to each other, but also to get the old finish off. And so what you see here is a filling compound which fills in the cracks and any irregularities there. And that in turn is sanded off as well, and you're left with just smooth, unfinished floor. And here's a neat artistic shot looking through the French doors with the American flag, and you can see the floor is all sanded up. In this next image here, you can see where we've put the stain on there, and we had to apply 2 coats of stain. The goal here was to make the floor look like it's been here 100 years. So I didn't want it to look like a brand new floor, and I think we've achieved that pretty well. Here's another view of the floor with shellac on it. We put several coats. I think it was 4 or 5 coats of shellac on top of that. And in this view, you can start to see where we've recreated the trims. And we tried as best as possible to replicate what was there. Here's another shot of that. Now, one of the things that happened as a result of all this is there were some sections of wallpaper that were kind of messed up, not by any fault of our own, but there was nothing we could do about it. So we went up in the attic and we found a roll of wallpaper that was original to the house, or at least to this style, and we were able to take pieces off of it and patch it in and repair that section. Once we were finished, you can't even tell that there was a problem. In this view, we went back into the room and we painted the room in a historic color, which we'll talk about in the next video. And finally, we put the table in, along with a nice tablecloth. And here it is looking in towards the living room. And finally, here's the final result. The room completed with a brand new floor and a table, some curtains, and some fancy paint there. And we think it turned out pretty well. It feels really good in there and looks great. And you can't tell where the old floor meets the new floor. It just looks absolutely vintage in there. So anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.